This morning, we're starting a new Christmas series, as Jeremy and Lori said. The series is called Advantageous, How to Make the Most of the Christmas Season. And let me tell you a little bit about the series as we kick it off. The title is a play on words, if you didn't recognize it. Advent is a part of the Christian calendar marking the 4 Sundays before Christmas. The Advent season is the first part of the Christian year, so today actually is New Year's Day by the liturgical calendar. You would only know this if you grew up in a traditional church like I did when we celebrated all the seasons of the Christian year, including Epiphany and Lent and Pentecost and Holy Week and others. If you did grow up in a traditional church, you know how Christians celebrate Advent. Usually we celebrate Advent by hanging up a lot of purple things. Pastors dress up in purple gowns, we hang up purple banners, and we break out the Advent wreath. The Advent wreath is a flat wreath with 4 candles on the side, 1 in the middle. Sometimes they're just white, sometimes they're purple and pink, and each Sunday a different candle is lit until the 5th candle is lit on Christmas. When I grew up in my Methodist church out in West County, the pastor picked a different family from the congregation to light a candle each Sunday. Usually that family was respectable and good-looking with happy, well-behaved children. The Hernan family never got chosen, by the way. The Hunter family did, and the Creel family, and the Broman family, not the Hernan family. Oh, well, I'm not Methodist anymore. They can do whatever they want. Anyway, the purpose of the Advent season is to prepare God's people for the arrival of His Son. The word Advent means arriving, and it's a reference to Jesus who arrived on Christmas. And just as Jesus arrived here to earth 2,000 years ago, so He will arrive again. And the Advent season is our chance to look back at His arrival and to look forward to His second arrival, and to prepare our lives, getting our priorities straight for His coming whenever it does happen. Can't get my page. Now, unfortunately, you know as well as I do, though, that the season of Advent isn't all that advantageous for us. We spend 4 weeks or more preparing for the arrival of Christmas, but that does not mean we're prepared for the arrival of the Messiah. We hang decorations, we buy gifts, we deck halls, we travel, we bake cookies, we spend money, we go to parties, and at the end of it all, we are no more prepared for Christ's arrival than we were at the start. If anything, we are less prepared. We are stressed out by the constant flurry of activity. We are indebted to credit card companies after buying gifts for people who don't need anything. We are overweight from eating food that isn't even good for us, and we are irritable after spending time with nieces and nephews that we enjoyed while they were little babies, but maybe not so much as they grow up. This is not the goal of Advent. Advent was designed to make us more ready for Christ, not less, which is why we're doing this series. Not that we shouldn't bake cookies and go to parties, but what would our lives look like if we spent the season of Advent actually preparing for Christ's arrival? What would we do? How would we spend our time? What would we focus on so that December is an advantage to our spirits and our church? Well, in answer to that question, we came up with a list of instructions that we think get at the heart of the Christmas season. Amidst all the hustle and the bustle of Christmas, if we spend the 4 weeks prior to the arrival of Jesus focusing on these instructions, we will be well prepared for His arrival whenever that happens. Advent is not just a time for parties, cookies, and sales. As we'll find out during this series, Advent is our time to worship Jesus. Advent is a time to preach the gospel. Advent is a time to pray for peace. Advent is a time to serve the poor. As we're going to talk about this morning, Advent is our time to search for truth. There's always a lot of searching going on Christmas. When I was a kid, I went searching through the house, looking for gifts that my parents hid. Usually I found them behind the furnace in the basement. Today I search for the perfect gift idea for family members. I'll go from store to store, from website to website, searching for that perfect gift that isn't too expensive. It's something they want, also something that is practical. Or if we're not searching for presents and gifts, we're searching for Christmas decorations. I thought I put them in the attic, but maybe in the basement. And here are the ornaments, but where are the lights? There's always a lot of searching going on during the holiday season, but it's not usually the right kind of searching. And even if we find what we're looking for, that doesn't mean we've found anything meaningful. Sure, Christmas is a time for searching, but not for decorations or gifts. It's a time of searching for the truth about God, the truth about His Son, the truth about ourselves. Which brings us back to that video from a few moments ago in the story of the three wise men. You probably know the story of the three wise men, if not from the Bible, then from Monty Python's Life of Brian, which tells an entertaining, if not necessarily historically accurate, rendition of the story. In the Gospel of Matthew, the author says that after Jesus was born in the town of Bethlehem, a star rose in the sky, and it was seen by a group of Magi in the east. Concluding that this star heralded the birth of a new king, probably of the Jews, given that the star rose over the land of the Hebrews, the Magi travel with gifts to go give the new king. On arriving to Palestine, they first travel to the temple in Jerusalem to inquire of the new arrival. King Herod, the ruler of the Jews at the time, hears about the inquiry and feels threatened that someone else has been born, whom others are calling king. He consults with his religious experts and finds that the scriptures say that yes, a new king is to be born, and that he is to be born in the town of Bethlehem, a small village 5 miles south of Jerusalem. Herod pretends to be interested in the baby and sends the wise men to Bethlehem to find the child, telling them to return at once after meeting him so that he too may go worship the new king. The Magi head south, picking up the star again, make their way to the place the child lies. They deposit great gifts for the child and his family, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and bow down to worship him. Then, being warned by angels that Herod did not intend to worship the king, but to kill him, the Magi head back to their homeland in the east, taking a different route, though, bypassing Jerusalem so that Herod never knows. That's the story of the Magi. Maybe you know it. It's a fascinating story, if even it does have a lot of unanswered questions. For example, what is a Magi? Scholars think that these Magi were pagan priests of some sort, but they might have been astrologers. We don't really know who they were or even what they were. Some later Christian tradition says that there were 3 Magi whose names were Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. Where do those names come from? Sounds like somebody just made them up for the pageant. Besides which, the Bible doesn't even say there were 3 of them, just says that they brought 3 gifts. And why were they so interested in coming too? Why did nobody else come? And what's with the star? Was it a star? Which star? Did anybody else see it? The story of the Magi has always seemed so incomplete and mysterious. Strange pagan astrologer priests follow a star nobody else apparently sees, crossing deserts to worship a Messiah king they know very little about. And yet, I've always liked the story of the Magi. I really connect with these guys. These guys were driven by their curiosity to go to tremendous lengths to investigate the truth. These guys were seekers on a quest. They show up in Jerusalem demanding to know, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? That's what I like about this story. It's a story about seekers. It's a story about God reaching out to people desperately searching for Him. And this is one of the things that Advent is all about, searching for the truth about God. And in this sense, the Magi story should be everyone's story. We are all seekers. We are all people on a quest for God, or rather, we should be. The Christian Bible invites us to search high and low for God. God speaks through the prophet Jeremiah and tells us, "You will seek me, you will find me, when you seek me with all your heart." The author of Hebrews in the New Testament writes, "Anyone who comes to God must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him." And even Herod, in an accidental and backhanded way, reminds us that we are seekers searching for a Savior. When the Magi come and inquire to him of the new child, he sends them to Jerusalem and says, "Go, make a careful search for the child." The wise men remind me that we are all seekers. We are all on a quest for God. Some of us get this, some of us don't. Some of us came here to church on Sunday morning because it's Sunday morning and we're supposed to be here. But some of us are here because we know that we're on a search for the divine. We know we're on a quest. We know that if we have any hope of finding meaning in our lives, let alone having any hope of making it to heaven, it's going to take a careful search for the child. This is important because God doesn't just reveal Himself to anybody. God reveals Himself to people who are looking for Him. Jesus Himself says, "Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you." God can be found by people who search for Him. And for us seekers here this morning, searching for God and truth, I think the story of the wise men has a lot to teach us about how to search for the truth about God. You see, the story of the wise men isn't just a fun little tale about three kings on camels with gifts. These wise men, these magi, were expert seekers. And whether we're Christians or whether we're non-believers on our own search for truth, regardless of what kind of search we're on, the story of the Magi gives us three lessons to bear in mind as we search for the truth about God. And that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. I want to talk to you about what the Magi have to teach us in our own search for the truth about God and His Son. Three lessons for the Magi. Here's lesson number one. Look for the signs. Look for the signs about God. Like I said, we don't know that much about the Magi's journey. We don't know what made them decide to look for the birth of a new king in Israel. Bible scholars speculate that perhaps a kingdom to Israel's east had copies of the Hebrew Bible. And perhaps religious experts in the east pored over these ancient Old Testament texts and maybe perhaps found messianic prophecies which predicted the arrival of a new king heralded by a star. Perhaps they read this verse, for example, from the Old Testament book of Numbers. In that Old Testament book, the author prophesies, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the foreheads of Moab, the skulls of all the people of Sheth. Edom will be conquered. Seir, his enemy, will be conquered, but Israel will grow strong. A ruler will come out of Jacob." Maybe these magi knew that verse. Maybe for centuries their people waited for a star to rise over Israel to herald the arrival of a new king that would crush the foreheads of Moab, the skulls of Sheth. Maybe they saw a star rising and decided they had to go visit and honor this new cosmic king before he started crushing skulls, just to get on his good side. Maybe that's how it happened. We don't know. But the point here is that the Magi, whoever they were actively looking for the signs of a king's arrival. They were searching actively the texts. They were scanning the skies. They were looking over the horizon. And when they saw a sign or something that might have even been possibly a sign, they went. As Matthew writes, "We saw his star in the east. We have come to worship him." Christmas is a season for signs. This is good for us, and it's important, because on our own search for God, He does not leave us helplessly wandering about in the shadows. He gives us signs, directions, hints, and clues. He gives us stars and scriptures. Our problem is that we don't care to look for them. We're too busy getting ready for Christmas that we miss the signs of Christ. I was thinking about this past week with Comet Ison streaking over us. You know about Comet Ison? Comet Ison, let me tell you, is a large 3-mile wide comet that passed around the sun last Friday and might have made it around intact. We'll actually find out in the next couple weeks with bated breath if it made it around the sun. For months, the comet has been streaking through the night sky, barreling toward the sun at a max speed of 845,000 miles per hour. Maybe you've heard about it, or maybe you haven't, which is my point. I'm not saying Comet Ison is a sign of the arrival of Christ, although that would be cool to see Jesus riding a comet. Not the reindeer comet, but the ball of ice and gas comet, just to be clear. What I'm saying is that if this were a sign, many of us wouldn't know because we're too busy with our lives to even look to the heavens for signs of the Lord's return. In fact, I sort of wonder how many magi back in Jesus' day could have seen the star. It was up there for everyone to see, but they weren't looking. Maybe they were too busy wrapping presents. They missed the signs. There are signs all around us, pointing us to God, pointing us to the truth, but we miss them because we're too busy and distracted, especially during the holidays. The other day, I was in a restaurant. There was a baby crying next to me. She was very loud and very irritating. I wanted to find another booth. But what is the cry of a baby, though, except an invitation from God to approach the throne of the manger? This past weekend, we started our Christmas shopping. Shopping really stresses me out for lots of reasons. I rarely enjoy it. But what is the tradition of gift giving but a sign of God's generosity to us in giving us His Son and our opportunity to bless others in the same way? Look for the signs this Christmas, the signs leading us to truth, the signs leading us to God, the signs leading us to His Son. That's Magi tip number 1. Magi lesson number 2 is leave your expectations behind. Leave your expectations behind. Isn't it interesting that when the wise men arrived from the east, where did they go? Where did they go to? The temple in Jerusalem. Very good. You didn't know about Comet Ison, but you knew about the temple. So good. That's what Matthew writes. Magi from the east came from Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? Came to Jerusalem, rather. And who can fault them? If I were to guess where a new king would be born and cared for, that's where I'd go. I'd go to the capital city. I'd go to the royal hospital. When Prince George was born this year, everyone lined up outside Buckingham Palace. That's where they expected him to make an appearance. That's what the wise men were thinking. But it's not what God had in mind, as the religious experts tell them. The child is to be born in the town of David, the town of Bethlehem. Bethlehem was a tiny little village 5 miles away from Jerusalem, but so insignificant that nobody ever had cause to go there. The priests said, in Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people. You can practically hear the priests in the story express their surprise at the king being born in Bethlehem. Nobody lived there. Before Jesus' birth, it wasn't even on most maps. It was Radiator Springs. When I was growing up, I used to spend Christmas in Lynn, Missouri, where my grandma lived. Lynn is a tiny, small little town, 20 miles east of Jeff City. Here it is on a map, in case you don't know where Lynn, Missouri is. You can long jump from one side of the town to the other. When I think of Bethlehem, I think of Lynn, Missouri. On the other hand, Lynn actually used to be a pretty small town, but now they have Lynn Technical College. So it's growing. So maybe a more appropriate comparison would be Rosebud or Gerald or Loose Creek or any of these other tiny eye-blink towns that we actually had to drive through on Highway 51 to get to the metropolis of Lynn. Compared to Gerald, Lynn was the big city, the Jerusalem. The point of all this is that in our search for the truth about God, He has a way of upending our expectations. We expect to find one thing, He surprises us with something else. We expect a royal prince in London, and He leads us to a peasant newborn in Gerald. Even when Jesus grew up, people expected He would become a military commander who would overthrow Israel's enemies. Instead, He was a suffering servant who died for their sins. After Jesus ascended into heaven, people expected His church would become a great and powerful institution, which it did eventually. But in the early years, it was just a small collection of poor people, slaves and women, that met in caves for protection. God always challenges our expectations. When we started Rooftop, I expected us to grow and thrive and have billboards and commercials. I never expected God to lead us to a little building in Afton. But we've met God here. We've become a community here. And that's the point. We can't discover the truth about God by holding on to our expectations about what we want to find. We have to abandon them if we want to discover the truth about Him. One of my friends has a friend that she's trying to get to come to church. Her friend doesn't want to come because she knows what she expects to find at church. She expects to find stuffy, hypocritical, closed-minded, judgmental, religious weirdos like she sees on the news. Those are her expectations. She will never discover the truth about God with those expectations. But we all have them. We all have expectations about how we're going to experience God and find the truth. We all have expectations about how we're going to spend Christmas, but we won't really encounter him unless we abandon them. The wise men would have never met Jesus unless they went to Bethlehem. Follow the signs, abandon your expectations. And lastly, go where the search takes you. Go where the search takes you. As Matthew writes, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem. Now, we don't know where the east is. We don't know where these guys came from. But we do know that we're not talking about East Jerusalem. We do know that we're not talking about the suburbs. We're talking about the east. We're talking about Babylon, about Assyria, about places that are months away by camel. And this is the point, so obvious that we oftentimes miss it. These men had lives, they had friends, they had jobs, they had limited resources. But their vision was so compelling, their curiosity so pricked, that they made the expensive, treacherous journey across deserts and mountains anyway. They went where the search took them, no matter how far away it was and what they had to give up to get there. The Bible is filled with stories of people who feel God calling them somewhere, and instead of sitting around brooding about it, they just go, even if they don't know where they're going. Take Abraham, for example, from the book of Genesis. Way back there, God tells him, leave your country, go to the land I will show you. Where are we going? It doesn't matter. I'll show it to you. Or take the disciples to whom Jesus said, come, follow me. Where are we going? Not important. Just come. In our search for God, we don't get to tell him where he'll let him take us. We don't get to decide how far in we'll go. We just go where the star leads. Years ago, when Michelle and I decided to adopt, we had no idea where that journey would lead us. All we knew is we felt a compelling call to bless a young child who was out there somewhere. We just decided to let the star lead. 9 months later, we found ourselves living with the boys in a small town in Guatemala, completing an adoption of a little baby girl. I remember sitting on the roof of this ancient hotel, looking at the 3 smoldering volcanoes surrounding the town of Antigua, where we were staying, and just marveling at where God leads his people if they are willing to go there. We didn't know we would be living in Antigua for a month. We didn't know we would be bringing back the most energetic child on the face of the earth. She had to get out of that country. It would not have contained her. All we knew is that we heard a call, we saw a star, and we decided to go. Most people are seekers, but they aren't active seekers. Remember, there's a verse from Proverbs which says, those who seek me diligently will find me. We might be seekers, but we might not be that diligent about it. We're curious about God, his will for our lives. We're not going to go to Guatemala or anything, let alone cross the desert following a star. I remember a guy I met many years ago here at church. He was a non-believer, a seeker. At least he thought he was. His girlfriend had been dragging him to church in a desperate attempt to save his soul. It wasn't working. So she scheduled an appointment with me for him. I always love those meetings. We got together and we laughed at his girlfriend's persistence. We had a good talk. He told me he wasn't a Christian, but he was interested. I said, well, how interested? He said, well, before I commit to any one religion, I sort of want to investigate all of them. I want to give every religion a fair shot. I want to line up Buddhism, Christianity, Mormonism, Islam, Shintoism, atheism, everything, hear their claims, and then make an informed opinion. Seems only fair. I said, that seems like a great plan. And then I asked, well, how are you doing on your quest? He said, well, he hadn't gotten very far because he's in law school and graduation's coming up, and well, you know. Aha. That is not making a diligent search for the child. That is not crossing deserts to find the truth. That is thinking about how you would search for the truth if you wanted to, maybe someday, if possibly you have the time. We won't find God like that, let alone truth about his Son. God will be found by those who search diligently for him. How diligent is your search? You want to find out the truth about God, but do you want to find out badly enough to read a book? Do you want to find out badly enough to go on a mission trip? Do you want to find out badly enough to sign up for a small group or meet with a pastor or go wherever the star leads you? So this December, I am sure you'll have a wonderful time preparing for Christmas when it arrives. But do not forget to prepare for Christ. Do not forget that, if anything, Advent is our time to search for the truth about him. Do not forget that we are all wise men on a quest to find the truth, and we have the promise of Scripture that we will find the truth about God if we earnestly, diligently search for him. So as you're searching for the truth this Advent, remember to look for the signs, leave your expectations behind, go where the search takes you. As you do so, you will find yourself at the manger on Christmas Day. Hopefully I, and certainly Jesus, will meet you there. Let's pray. Father, I pray for my brothers and sisters here in this room, in this sanctuary, in this congregation. I pray as we kick off the Advent season that we may focus on this time by doing what you've given us to do mostly, which is search for the truth, worship Jesus, serve the poor, pray for peace. We have a lot of responsibilities and things to do, even getting the church ready this past week, decorations up, new series planned. It's all very chaotic. But help us stay focused on this time as our opportunity to search for the truth about who you are, who we are, how much you love us, as seen in the life and the death and the sacrifice of your Son, Jesus. Thank you for this opportunity to meet together, to be your people. Pray that we can leave here determined all the more to search for the truth about you in our lives. Pray these things in your name. Amen.